Every year, thousands of fugitives run. Most are caught, some are killed, but a few simply vanish. No bodies, no arrests, no closure, just questions, and the chilling possibility that they're still out there. Without further ado, here's the story of an American fugitive who disappeared without a trace after spectacular scenes. On Friday, November 23, 1962, the day after Thanksgiving, George Wright, then 19 and from East Orange, New Jersey, and 3 accomplices, Walter McGee, Elizabeth Roswell, and Julio De Leon of Asbury Park, were involved in the commission of multiple armed robberies. The 4 suspects first robbed the Sands Motel in Englishtown of $200. They then made their way to the Collingswood Esso filling station on eastbound Route 33 in Wall Township. At around 9:25 p.m. during the second robbery, McGee fatally wounded Walter Patterson, a 42-year-old World War II veteran and Bronze Star recipient who lived in Howell. Patterson was a father of 2 teenage daughters. Patterson, who earlier that evening had relieved his brother Harry C. Patterson Jr. and sent him home to have dinner with his family, was taken to Fitkin Memorial Hospital in Neptune Township, where he died from the gunshot wound 2 days later. Wright, armed with a sawn-off .22 caliber rifle, and McGee, armed with a .32 caliber pistol, were both wearing women's pantyhose over their faces when they assaulted Patterson. McGee fired 2 shots during the robbery. Patterson was shot once in the abdomen before the 4 got away with $70 in cash. Police later determined it was a shot from McGee's pistol that led to Patterson's death. The 4 were arrested 2 days later. On December 13, 1962, Wright was indicted on state charges along with his associates. McGee, as the triggerman, was charged with Patterson's murder and sentenced to a life prison term in February 1963, but was paroled in August 1977. Wright, as one of the hold-up men, was also charged with murder. On February 15, 1963, Wright reportedly changed his plea from innocent to no contest to the charge of murder. In order to avoid a jury trial that could have resulted in the death penalty, Wright was subsequently sentenced to 15 to 30 years in prison. On August 19, 1970, between 10 and 11 p.m., after serving over 7 years and 6 months of his sentence, Wright joined 3 inmates and just walked out between bed checks from a state prison farm at Leesburg State Prison, now known as the Bayside State Prison in Leesburg, New Jersey. Wright escaped with accomplice, George Brown, who was serving a 3 to 5 year sentence for a 1968 armed robbery conviction. They allegedly stole the prison warden's car to get away. They made their way to Detroit, where they became affiliated with the Black Liberation Army, an underground Marxist-Leninist, Black nationalist militant organization that operated in the United States from 1970 to 1981. The groups calling themselves the BLA carried out bombings, killings of police officers and random white people. They also carried out robberies, which participants termed expropriations, and organized prison breaks. On August 26, 1970, federal complaints were issued in Atlantic City, charging Brown and Wright with unlawful flight to avoid confinement. However, he managed to avoid being caught. On July 31, 1972, Wright, then 29, together with George Brown, Joyce Brown, aka Tillerson, then 31, of Spartanburg, South Carolina, accompanied by her 2-year-old daughter Melvin McNair, then 23, born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Jean Carol Allen McNair, then 25, from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, accompanied by her 1-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son, were involved in a spectacular hijacking of an airplane. They boarded Delta Airlines Flight 841 in Detroit. The DC-8 flight was bound for Miami. Wright was dressed allegedly as a priest, and using the alias the Reverend Larry Darnell Burgess, he smuggled a handgun aboard the flight in a hollowed-out Bible. One passenger described the apparent ringleader as a black man, about 30, wearing a black mohair suit which others described as a clerical outfit. The pilot of the hijacked Detroit-Miami flight, Captain William Harold May, then 41, and a 20-year Delta employee, said Wright was the group's leader. The hijackers, allegedly members of the Black Liberation Army, seized the plane as it approached Miami, where they demanded that FBI agents, dressed only in bathing suits, deliver $1 million ransom to the plane. The FBI complied. The hijackers allowed the 86 hostage passengers to leave the plane in Miami, but kept the flight crew. They then ordered the plane to fly to Boston, where they refueled and took on an international navigator. They then directed the plane to Algiers, where they sought political asylum since the Algerian government had shown compassion towards revolutionaries. May told reporters that two of the hijackers smoked marijuana continuously during the flight and commented, "They said they were revolutionaries, that America is a decadent society and they didn't want to live here anymore." Upon arrival in Algeria, Melvin McNair had parting words for his pilot. "We're famous," he said. "Send us a copy of your paper." On Wednesday, August 2, 1972, federal complaints of air piracy charges were filed in Miami, naming the 5 accomplices as defendants. Wright and his associates were briefly taken into custody but were released after a few days. Reportedly, Wright and his group were taken in by the American writer and prominent Black Panther Eldridge Cleaver, whom Algeria's sympathetic socialist government allowed to open an office. Cleaver wrote an open letter to the then Algerian president, Houari Boumediene. This hijacking represented the final test of the Third World nation's commitment to supporting some contingents of the African American freedom movement. At the request of the U.S. government, the Algerian government confiscated and returned the $1 million in ransom money to the U.S. After the hijackers' calls to have the ransom money restored to them were ignored by the Algerian government, Wright and his associates disappeared. On May 26, 1976, Wright's 4 associates were located in Paris and arrested by the national police for carrying false U.S. passports. Facing extradition to the United States, the 4 issued an appeal to the French people on October 11, 1976, claiming that while they were ready to face the consequences of our act, they could not expect a fair trial in America and would be condemned to spend the rest of our days in infernal prisons. French authorities declined the American extradition request in November 1976, holding the 4 defendants in Fleury-Mérogis prison, awaiting trial on hijacking charges. On November 24, 1978, the 4 were convicted by a French court for the hijacking. All received 5-year sentences, but 2 years were suspended from the women's terms. In the United States, they would have faced a minimum of 20 years. The jury had found them guilty but noted extenuating circumstances. George Brown and Melvin McNair were released in 1981, but George Wright, the ringleader, was still nowhere to be found. After the apprehension of his 4 accomplices, Wright remained the lone hijacker at large. Wright made his way from France to Guinea-Bissau. Wright's new identity was given to him by Guinea-Bissau's government when it granted him political asylum in the 1980s, and that was accepted by Portugal, Ferreira said. At the time, the tiny West African nation of Guinea-Bissau was a single-party Marxist state that looked kindly on black liberation movements. On September 26, 2011, Wright was eventually arrested in Algueiro Mem Martins, Portugal, after 41 years on the run, as the result of a United States Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force and the New Jersey Department of Corrections Special Investigations Division that introduced cold case evidence from New Jersey. After locating Wright, the task force confirmed Wright's fingerprints from the New Jersey arrest with the fingerprints on the ID card issued by the Portuguese government. Wright spent nearly 3 weeks in jail before being released under house arrest. The United States sought his extradition with the possibility that he would finish the remaining 22 years of his sentence. However, the request was denied on the grounds that Wright had become a Portuguese citizen after marrying a Portuguese woman in 1991. Wright, who lived under the name of José Luis Jorge dos Santos, had no known occupation, but allegedly at one point owned a barbecue chicken restaurant, sold items at a stall along a popular tourist beach, worked as a bouncer at a local bar, and had coached youth in basketball. He married a Portuguese-English translator who was 13 years younger, and together the couple had 2 children. His neighbors knew his first name was George, but did not know his history, assuming he was African, not American. Even his wife was shocked to learn about her husband's past. She said she thought the jail escape was just a boast. "Now I've found out the rest," she said. George Wright had finally got away with it, but it costed him 40 years on the run, but his story is nothing short of spectacular. Was it worth it? Let us know in the comment. Thanks for watching.